What if I told you that some of history's most prestigious institutions were built on a foundation of stolen childhoods? Today, we're diving into a story that most history books gloss over. A story about how empires don't just conquer lands, they conquer souls. Before we begin this journey together, I want you to hit that subscribe button if you're ready to explore the uncomfortable truths that shaped our world. And let me know in the comments, what's one historical fact that completely changed how you see the past? Picture this. It's 1580 in a small mountain village in what we now call Serbia. 10-year-old Marko is helping his grandmother bake bread for the weekly market. The smell of fresh dough fills their tiny kitchen, and through the window, he can see his father chopping wood for winter. This is his entire universe. These familiar faces, these daily rhythms, this language that flows like music from his tongue. He doesn't know that in 3 days, everything he's ever known will be ripped away forever. The Ottoman Empire had a system called Devshirme, which translates roughly to gathering or collecting. But they weren't collecting taxes or tribute. They were collecting children. Every few years, Imperial scouts would ride into Christian villages across the Balkans. They carried lists, quotas, and the absolute authority of the Sultan. They weren't looking for volunteers. They were shopping for raw material. When those horses thundered into Marko's village, his grandmother grabbed his hand so tightly her nails drew blood. She knew. Every adult knew. The children, they were about to learn the hardest lesson of their lives. The selection process was methodical. Too young, not useful yet. Too old, already set in their ways. But a bright 10-year-old with quick eyes and a strong build? Perfect. Marko's mother collapsed when they pointed at her son. His father stood frozen, knowing that resistance meant death for the entire family. As they loaded Marko onto a cart with 12 other boys, he could hear his grandmother singing the same lullaby she'd sung to him every night of his life. He would never hear it again. The journey to Istanbul took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of walking, sleeping on hard ground, and watching boys disappear. Some ran away in the night. They were never seen again. Others simply stopped walking one morning and refused to get up. But here's what struck me when researching this story. These weren't random acts of cruelty. This was a calculated system designed to break down individual identity and rebuild these children as instruments of imperial power. Marko learned his first survival lesson on day 3 of the march. A boy named Stefan, maybe 14, tried to comfort a younger child who was crying for his mother. The guards separated Stefan from the group and beat him in front of everyone else. The message was clear. Compassion was weakness, and weakness would not be tolerated. By the time they reached the outskirts of Constantinople, Marko had learned to make himself invisible. He spoke only when asked direct questions. He kept his eyes down. He moved like a shadow. But the most chilling part? He was starting to forget what his grandmother's voice sounded like. The Enderun Palace School was called the world's first institutionalized education for the gifted. Sounds impressive, right? World-class education, training in languages, mathematics, arts, and sciences. These boys would become administrators, generals, even grand viziers. But here's the question that haunts me. What's the real cost of an education that starts with erasing who you are? Marko, now renamed Mehmet, was housed in dormitories with 60 other boys. They slept on silk sheets in marble rooms that were more beautiful than anything he'd ever imagined. But beauty can be its own kind of prison. The education was real. By age 15, he spoke 4 languages fluently. He could calculate complex mathematical equations, debate philosophy, and create intricate calligraphy that would make masters weep with envy. But every lesson came with an unspoken curriculum. You are not Serbian anymore. You are not Christian anymore. You are not Marco anymore. Your past is not just forbidden, it's shameful. Here's what really gets to me. The system was designed to make the boys complicit in their own transformation. Success meant embracing everything that had been taken from them. Resistance meant punishment, isolation, or worse. What haunts me most about this system is how it turned survival into a moral compromise. These boys weren't just receiving an education. They were navigating a world where their safety depended on abandoning pieces of their humanity. The palace operated on a complex hierarchy of power and protection. Older students could shield newcomers from the worst abuses, but protection always came with a price. Always. Some boys, like our Marco, found ways to excel academically while keeping their deepest selves hidden. Others embraced the system completely, becoming its most enthusiastic enforcers. And still others simply broke. What strikes me as particularly cruel is how the system created impossible choices. Resist and face punishment, or worse, comply and become complicit in the oppression of others. Excel and be rewarded with more responsibility for perpetuating the very system that had destroyed your own childhood. By age 20, Marco, now fully Mehmet in every way that mattered to the world, had graduated to a position of administrative responsibility. He was educated, powerful, and by all external measures, successful. But success in this system meant one thing. He was now responsible for selecting and training the next generation of stolen children. This is where the story gets really complicated. And it's why I think this history matters today. What happens to a person when survival requires them to become what they once feared? Some graduates of the palace school rose to incredible heights of power. They became viziers, generals, governors of provinces. They shaped the politics and culture of one of history's most influential empires. But what does power mean when it's built on the erasure of your own identity? Here's what really strikes me. This wasn't a hidden perversion or a historical aberration. This was an openly celebrated system, praised for its effectiveness and defended by its beneficiaries. It was institutional child exploitation disguised as educational opportunity, and it lasted for centuries. The boys who survived learned to navigate a world where their humanity was secondary to their utility, where their intelligence was valued, but their authentic selves were not, where advancement required surrendering pieces of their souls that could never be recovered. Today, when we visit these magnificent palaces, we see architectural wonders and cultural treasures. Tour guides speak of educational innovations and imperial grandeur. But the marble corridors keep their darkest secrets, and the rooms where education and exploitation intertwined remain silent about the price paid by thousands of forgotten children. The morning mist that once carried Marco's footsteps through his Serbian village has long since faded, but his story, multiplied by thousands of other stolen childhoods, echoes through time, demanding that we remember not just the glory of empires, but the human cost of that glory. These weren't just historical curiosities or exotic practices from a distant past. They were real children with real dreams, real families, and real futures that were systematically erased in service to imperial power. Their stories deserve to be remembered not as footnotes to imperial grandeur, but as testimonies to human resilience in the face of institutional cruelty. If this story moved you, consider how we tell history today. What stories are we still not telling? What voices are we still not hearing? Hit that like button if you believe, that understanding the full truth of the past is essential to building a better future. And remember, history isn't just about dates and battles and empires. It's about individual human beings whose experiences echo across centuries, reminding us that behind every system of power are real people paying real costs. Thanks for joining me on this difficult but important journey through history. I'll see you in the next video.